Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to COVID, crisis management, resilience, business continuity, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community respond to, prepare for, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Welcome to November's show. Actually, this will be airing December 1st. So welcome to December's show. It's Bunnies and Rainbows time, again with Regina Phelps to talk about all things COVID and RSV. Regina, welcome back.
Alex, it's such a treat to be here. I like the title of Bunnies and Rainbows. It makes me very happy. And you know what was actually Bunnies and Rainbows is you and I got to see each other face to face in the flesh in Toronto last week, which was way fun. Way fun.
We did at the Continuity and Resilience Today conference. We finally got to see each other, and it had been 3 years since the last time we saw each other face to face.
Yeah.
There was this great fun thing going around somewhere.
A little bit like the thing going around right now, right?
Yeah, we've got so much to talk about with what's happening in the world with regards to, oh my goodness, flus, COVID, just so much.
RSV, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's now becoming a flu and an RSV expert. So should I just dig right in and we can start?
Yeah, let's just jump right in. Why not?
Great. As always, I'm going to share my screen because I have, of course, bunnies and rainbows to show you. Some days I'm actually going to pull that out and do bunnies and rainbows because I think that would be Okay, so I want to start. Whoops. Let me go back. Okay, great. So let me talk about where we are right now. And I'm going to start with the flu first because we're in what's called the Tri-demic. Do you might remember when everybody said on the first year of COVID that we could actually have a twin-demic? Do you remember that in December, November of 2020? But of course, that didn't happen because everybody was still wearing masks and for the most part behaving themselves. And so we didn't have this acceleration of all these respiratory viruses. But this year, we're actually having the Tri-demic, which is the flu, RSV, and COVID. So what I'm showing our listeners, and if you're on Voice America, just know that I'm showing a slide that shows the United States, and then also a curve demonstrating the increase of flu in the U.S. The flu is so bad this year in the U.S. that actually the CDC had to come up with another color, which is purple. And so historically, when you looked at Flu Weekly, which if you are in the US or just curious about what's happening with the flu in the United States, if you go and just simply Google Flu Weekly CDC, and you'll find a very cool page that talks about everything related to the flu. And on this particular slide, I want to talk about two things. One is the flu map of the US, which is on fire. Wow. So when you look at the map, the whole southern part of the U.S. is either red, which used to be the worst color. Actually, brownish orange used to be their worst color. Now it's filled with red, dark red, dark red, purple, and also a little bit of orange. There's only about 4 states left that have very little flu in transmission. And so it gives you an idea, and why this is actually helpful to look at on a regular basis. They update the map weekly, is it gives you an idea of what's happening in your community. And some states, you can also go to the State Department of Health, and you can drill down and see what kind of flu figures are in your community. Most city or county departments of health don't have that kind of granular detail, but the state often does because they have to submit it to the CDC. The other part of this slide shows this incredible U-shaped curve, and it starts with the flu in February of 2021. So you'll see it was relatively relatively low, if you will. But then what you do is when you look over to the far right-hand side, you'll see this incredible dramatic rise, and that's the flu that we have right now in the U.S. We are really way ahead of schedule. Usually the flu really starts to become a problem around December, but we are already in deep trouble with many hospitals in the US already at record numbers of people that are ill. and being hospitalized. And that specifically also really talks to the child population as well, so pediatrics. And I'm going to talk one more thing, and I want to hear about what's happening in your world. Our COVID numbers in the United States, if you look at this particular diagram from the New York Times, what you'll see is our flu reported cases are still relatively flat. But remember that flu numbers as far as cases is not a very reliable indicator. Most people in the US are actually doing home tests. Many communities have disbanded their PCR tests that you used to be able to go to an area and actually get tested. You have to go to your physician now. And so they are not a reliable indicator. The test positivity rate also, because of that's not very reliable, but you can see that people that are reporting their tests or that are actually still getting PCRs, I have a high degree of positivity for the number of tests that are being done. But I do want to point out one thing that's really important is our hospital numbers still remain really high in the US. 29,000 people right now are in hospitals, and about 3,500 of those are in ICUs. That's a lot of people taking up space in the hospital system. And we still embarrassingly have around 300 to 350 deaths per day, every day in the US. The average daily total of deaths right now for the last 7 days is 330 adults. Most of those are older. Most of them, again, by older, I'm defining that as over 65. If you're wondering, am I in that category? And many of them have comorbidities, which means they have other problems such as, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, obesity, and so on. So that's really when you look at those people that are currently impacted. Many of them are also vaccinated. Now, I want to just talk for a second about that. There was a study that just came out in Nature a few weeks ago. Oh, actually, only about 10 days ago. And it talked about how many people now that are dying are vaccinated. And that is true, but it's not really of good explanation of what's happening. That's really including people that are primarily older, usually have some comorbidities, and often have only had 3 vaccines. So the initial 2-shot series and then a 1-dose booster. So 3 shots, which is really what's going to be called the prime series going forward. So they have not had additional boosters beyond those 3 shots I mentioned. So those people that are up on their shots may still get ill, but your chances of dying or going to the hospital are quite low. So let's talk about what's happening in your world. What's going on with you, dear?
Well, all kinds of things have been happening up here lately. It's hard to know even where to start. So I'll just start and see where I end.
That's right. What's good? I'll ask questions.
COVID, RSV, and flu cases are on the rise. Really based on exactly the same things that you just went through and right. The things that you just mentioned. What's happening with COVID, because places have shut down, you can't easily get tests anymore. A lot of people are just staying home and have been doing that for a while now.
And they're doing home tests pretty much?
If they can get any kind of a test, yes. My neighbor, as I was talking to her last night when I was walking the dog, we were 20 feet apart, thank goodness. But she's been ill for the last week and a half. And she said, she's older, and she said it's the worst she can remember in her lifetime, ever having this
probably has COVID.
Cold. But she had negative and positive results going back and forth. So because there's this weird flu also that's going around. So she thinks she had some sort of a combination at some point that was driving something. Wow. RSV cases for kids up all across the board. There's one hospital in Kitchener or Waterloo, which is the city just down the road from me, about 15 minutes. They had one hospital operating at 150% capacity.
Wow. Hallway healthcare.
Yes. And what some hospitals are already doing, even those that are not being overrun at the moment, are starting to move and juggle patients around. Sending, if a hospital has a really low, I'm not even sure the right term, but occupancy rate, would that be right? occupancy rate, sending some of their less critical patients there so that one hospital can become totally focused on RSV or COVID or something.
Wow. Wow.
And flu cases, as I say, are going up to the roof. More people are getting some flu shots, but because things are happening so quickly here,
Right.
that really it doesn't matter. People already have it. Intermingling. You're starting to see people now starting to change their perceptions, even if they were vaccinated and they weren't wearing masks, are now starting to say, maybe I should put a mask on. This, what's going on is a little scary. And I think what the scary part has done is because of RSV and kids now.
Kids, right.
And now people are saying, I have kids. I didn't worry about it, for the last 3 years, but all of a sudden they don't want their daughter or their son to get sick.
Right.
I've got coworkers in Edmonton, Alberta. 2 of them live in Alberta. Both families got COVID. All the kids got sick, and all the kids got it really bad. So, and they're older kids too. They're 14, 15, 16.
Wow.
And they got it really bad. So that's happening. That's putting a huge stress on the healthcare system, because we already have doctors and nurses and administrators and janitorial staff and other people who are really hanging by a thread because they've gone through 3 years of all of this, hell, all this craziness, and they are just, overwhelmed. How can they go another 6, 7 months or a year with more things? So that's putting huge stress, and no one really knows how to fix that, because people are still quitting or they're getting sick themselves. So they have to pull themselves away, which puts even greater stress on those that are still available to work. Schools are opening, have been open for a while. There is talk right now of asking, without mandating, that everybody wear masks. The fear is if they put a mandate in, this is what provincial and federal governments are saying, the fear is if they mandate a mask, they could end up with another protest out in Windsor or Vancouver or the big one in Ottawa.
The Freedom Convoy will return.
Yeah, quote unquote freedom convoy, and cause other issues again. So no one's using that word mandate. Even the director of health for Canada-wide is strongly recommending people putting their masks back on. We've been
doing that in the US too, where no one wants to use the M word.
Yeah. One of my neighbors who cuts hair, they're starting to revert back to some of the protocols they had in place with social distancing and people wearing masks and things like that. They're starting to head back in that direction. Some other stores are now doing the same thing.
It's a little deja vu moment, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mentioned school with the masks. This same people that I work with in Edmonton, we were talking last week, and they said there were almost 20,000 students that were out of class.
Wow.
For some reason, almost like 20%. It was between 18 and 20,000. And
they had respiratory something.
Yeah, and I already looked it up online, and they had 100,000. They have roughly just over 100,000 students in the public school system in Edmonton. So they had almost 20% of their students home sick. So that's page 1. Just it's all kinds of things. Because of the respiratory illnesses and the especially with RSV in children, there's a demand shortage for children's medicine.
I heard that Tylenol was impossible to find. Children's Tylenol was hard to find in Canada.
It is. I went.
That was shocking to me. I mean, that's just generic and available everywhere, right?
It is, but everything happened and exploded so fast that people just they had to get their hands on it. So the shelves are actually empty with children's medicine right now.
That's also another thing that's, I just want to add on that. Another drug that's often given when people have secondary bacterial infections is amoxicillin, a liquid amoxicillin, which is also impossible to find anywhere in the world right now.
Mhm.
because it's often given to kids when they are trying to fight off a bacterial infection that's on top of a viral one, and you can't find amoxicillin to save your life.
Yeah. And so all the shelves are empty with children's medicine. Even at the large grocery store where I go to, they have a little pharmacy area as well. They're all empty. Walmart is empty. You know, all those big box stores and any other pharmacies across Canada, they're all empty. So
And
the
after
federal
everybody
government,
listens to us, people are going to go out and try and find something, right? Just in case.
good luck. Good luck. You know, power to you if you can find it.
Right. Right.
So the federal government has stepped in and they've, I can't remember who it is they've contacted, but they're importing 1 million packages, not doses, but packages. So bottles right now, which I've heard is probably going to go up. They're importing 1 million bottles to spread across Canada right now,
Wow.
to at least every family be able to get one bottle in their hands, you know, those that have kids. So that's happening right now.
Hmm.
Then there is, I already mentioned the perceptions that some people are now starting to wear masks that didn't before, that thought that, you know, the whole thing was stupid, but now they're starting to change. So perception is changing. Flu, a lot of people are catching the flu here. There seems to be a weird, and I know you're going to be talking about some of this later too. I don't want to say it's COVID, just COVID, or just the flu. There's some weird hybrid that's impacting everybody. They said they feel like they have the flu, but they've got all the symptoms of COVID, or they feel like they've got COVID, but then there's these weird other symptoms that seem to be more flu.
Well, to be honest with you, people can get both at the same time.
Yeah.
So you could actually have the flu and get COVID, or vice versa. And as we've talked about many times, when you test, many times you are positive, you feel like hell, but you still takes 2 or 3 days for your actual home antigen test to turn positive. So
yeah,
if you feel like hell and you don't know what's going on, you need to basically test for about 3 days before you absolutely are sure that you don't have COVID.
yeah. And when people are catching this, and people that I know, I've had family members catch this. My niece has got it. Thankfully, I'm still fine and haven't caught anything, not even the original COVID yet. So, knock on wood on that. But when they're getting it, it's lasting for well over a week. It's not just a couple of days of feeling bad. It's lasting at least a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Well, and let me just say, many people don't understand that COVID is a 14-day illness at minimum.
Yeah.
14 days. And the first week is essentially where you have viral replication. And the second week is where you actually have the inflammatory response, which is when people that are going to get really sick. And that's where they become hypoxic and have a lot of other related issues. So if you think COVID is a short-term illness, it is 14 days is the actual length of time you can expect to feel probably not so great for a lot of that 14. And maybe that goes on longer after that, and which turns into the whole long COVID related issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking if they catch the flu, well, then it's usual. You know, you feel crappy for a day, then you've got 2 days where you really feel crappy, and then you start to improve after that.
There's crappy and there's crappier.
Yeah, there's crappier. So I think that's what some people are thinking, but they're realizing it's lasting longer than that. So they know they've got something worse other than that. And I mentioned testing. It's kind of impossible for most people.
You get a PCR test, right?
Yeah, I can't get a test. There, you know, all the testing centers that were open at one point, every single one is closed all across the country. Like nothing is open. And some people have said, well, go to your doctors. Well, no doctor's office is going to let you walk in there, whether you're wearing a mask or not, you know, and some people just don't have the energy to do it if they're already feeling like, you know, crap. So that's, I think there is a, there's a little graphic that a hospital put out up near where I go to for a break out in the country, a hospital up in Northern Ontario, and it says, you know, something to the effect of stop, check, and then go. So stop, don't, if you're feeling the sniffles, don't go to the hospital right off the bat. Just stop.
Right.
Take a look, self-diagnose, find out what you have, what you don't have. Call telehealth or something, because we can. I don't know if you have it in the States, but
We have that too. Yeah.
yeah. So telehealth, call the a nurse practitioner that usually answers the phone. They'll help you through, find out if you do need to go anywhere, and if they say, yeah, it sounds like you have COVID, stay where you are, don't go anywhere, and they give you direction there. If there's something else, then they'll say, okay, this is what you do. Go here, and they'll direct you to a specific spot to go to. So that's becoming more and more communicated now. I'm not sure if
Right.
I've got the right words, but stop, check, and go. But
Which is
that's
really
being promoted
important
a lot.
because unless you are having, shortness of breath, unless you're really having, protracted vomiting and you can't stop, or, there are certain kind of things that you really would say, yes, I need to go see a physician right now, or I need to go to an emergency department. But if you just feel like hell, then stay home, hydrate, rest. If you have COVID tests, take them, and check your temperature, be responsible. Don't go out and infect a lot of other people. I think, it's been a while since people, especially if people haven't had COVID before, or maybe they had it before and they had a light case. And now we're getting hit with, oh my God, I haven't had the flu in 5 or 6 years. And when, the flu makes you feel awful. Many people don't remember that perhaps, but the flu is not a cold. You know exactly the difference when you have flu.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like you were hit by a truck. Every muscle in your body hurts. It goes on and you just want to die. That is the flu. A cold is where you don't feel so great. Your nose runs. You might have a little bit of a temperature. You have a cough. They are really different. And COVID can actually infect you when you have other respiratory illnesses. So you could easily be having a multiple diagnosis situation. But yeah, you should be really responsible and don't go to places where you can infect people unless you really are experiencing things like shortness of breath, etc.
Yeah. So that's really what's happening up here, and that's happening from coast to coast to coast. So
let me just talk about 2 more things before we move on, because I want to see. I don't know what's happening. Do you know what's going on with your subvariants in Canada by chance? I didn't look.
No, that I don't know.
I want to talk about this very quickly, and then I want to talk about one other thing, and then we'll take a break. So there's a huge shift going on, and I know that everybody has been confused by so many different initials that we have to deal with, but you can pretty much say goodbye now to the original Omicron variant here in the United States, which is BA.5. And if you're looking at this slide on YouTube, what you'll see is that there's a turquoise kind of color that used to be very large. Certainly remember that happened here around Thanksgiving last year, and has been the dominant variant for almost a year. And as you can see from this particular slide, going from a left to right, now there are 2 subvariants that are now taking over from mom, who is now retiring, and that is BQ.1 and BQ.1.1. And here in the United States, those 2 alone comprise now 57% of the cases that are being PCR tested. There's another one that we should also keep our eye on, which is in this particular slide, is a peach color, which is XBB, which came out of Singapore. It is also a subvariant of Omicron, but that actually was really problematic in Singapore, and has been also problematic in adjoining countries. But that's what we have to look forward to. As far as BQ.1.1, it is more immune evasive than BA.5. But as far as whether it makes people more ill or more significantly impacted, I think at this point, most people believe it's probably a wash. However, it's infecting people who just recovered, let's say, from a BA.5 infection. So it is very immune evasive. So just, you might say, well, gosh, I got COVID 2 months ago, I'll probably be fine. Not necessarily. No, you could still easily get BQ.1 or BQ.1.1. So that's something to think about. And I would imagine that Canada is probably tracking the same with us. BQ.1.1 is pretty much the big up and coming variant around the world. And the last thing I want to mention before we take a break has nothing to do with the RSV or the flu or COVID, but it's another disease. I'm so wishing I could stop talking about diseases and we could talk about other things, Alex, but
One
it's
day,
measles.
one day.
One day. It's measles. This caught my attention because the CDC and the WHO issued an alert over the weekend about how bad measles has become. And that's because a lot of people, because of the pandemic, and certainly in developing nations, which were really on track to really make a huge difference in the elimination of measles worldwide, have really missed a lot of vaccines because of COVID. And so now we have a huge measles problem worldwide. In 2021, a record of 40 million kids worldwide missed their measles vaccine, either the first or the second dose, which means they are not protected. They're partially immunized, which means you could still get the measles. The CDC and the WHO also said that we're currently on track for having 9 million measles cases worldwide and 128,000 deaths of kids primarily in 2021. That's awful. Measles is a terrible disease and can be fatal, especially for children. And so what's really the paradox here, if you will, is that we were highly effective in getting the vaccine for COVID out. But what happened is all the other immunizations have lagged worldwide. And now we are really in a crisis worldwide about measles in particular. And that particular vaccine is called MMR, which is measles, mumps, and rubella. And we are way behind in many places around the world, probably Canada as well, certainly in the US. And so we have a lot of kids that could be exposed and actually could come down with measles. And if you're an adult and have not been vaccinated for measles, you have the opportunity to have that happen to you as well. And for people, adults that get measles, it is awful illness. And you really want to make sure that you're up to date with your MMR and MMR, and you want to make sure that your kids are vaccinated. So I plead with all of our listeners to really look at your kids' vaccine records. This is the time to really do something about them.
Well, I'm happy to say I'm up to date on all of that stuff.
Good.
So thank goodness. Who knew in the last couple of months we've talked about polio
Right.
resurfacing in areas we never thought it would appear, and now measles, coming back.
It is. Yeah. In my adult life, I would have never thought we'd be having these conversations, but we certainly are, which is a whole nother conversation we could talk about with anti-vaccine folks. But
so on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. It was a long one too. There was so much to talk about.
Yeah, you told me, you said, "Wow, it's going to be long."
Yeah. We're talking with Regina Phelps today, and we'll be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.